time for us to zoom in on a discussion on the various protest actions that have been taking place under the lockdown and the right to protest that is, currently in the spotlight. Many protests happening, so we will look into that. This is the lead.
Right. In March of 2020, government imposed a ban on political gatherings as part of a host of interventions aimed at managing the COVID-19 pandemic. That move was unprecedented in the country's post-apartheid history. Since then, many have been concerned about the level of uneven and inconsistent policing of gatherings. Of course, it follows the EFF's march to SAPRA offices 2 weeks ago. Police were set to open a criminal case against the convener for the alleged contravention of the Disaster Management Act. And more recently, suspended MKMV spokesperson Carl Niehaus has been issued with a 3,000 rand fine for breaking lockdown regulations. To speak to us more about the right to protest under lockdown regulations, we're joined by lawyer and expert on the right to protest, Stanley Malematja. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Looking at how the net has tightened on the right to protest in South Africa is something to really pay a lot of attention to, especially during the lockdown period, as we've seen in the recent weeks.
Yeah, good morning, Mpho, and good morning to the viewers, and thank you for having me. I think right now what the government is grappling with is, trying to curb the spread of the coronavirus and also justifiably so limit one of the most fundamental human rights, which is the right to protest. So the net is closing down, and I think this is not a new thing. I think I'm seeing it for like the fourth time since the pandemic, because I think last year I even wrote and published an op-ed with the Daily Maverick where I argued that government is using the lockdown regulations to decide or to dictate who can protest and who cannot protest, because we've just seen how inconsistent the state has been approaching protests. Some protests are quickly clamped down, while other protests are just allowed to proceed.
I mean, the inconsistency goes even further than that with the clamping down or allowing them to proceed. That, if you look at the EFF protests, for instance, that happened to SAPRA not so long ago, they are looking into a criminal case for that protest. But other protests or gatherings haven't really been clamped down on this. I mean, when you think of, what happened when Jacob Zuma was in court not so long ago, and there was a gathering outside where the ANC's, his Zuma supporters essentially addressed the media, they addressed the public, but nothing has been said about those type of protests. Why is it that government aren't approaching this with a single vision lens? Instead, they're looking at two different sides of a coin.
If we look at the Regulations of Gatherings Act 205 of 1993, that is the prime principal legislation which governs protests in our country. And if we look at the definition of a gathering, we will see that it is a pressure group either to support a particular political agenda or to go against a particular political agenda. So what we can draw a line there is that once a protest is in support of something that is in favor of the government, most likely that protest won't be clamped down. But if you look into the most material protests which seek to hold our government accountable, trust you me, if our government had the SWAT team, they will bring in the SWAT team to clamp down that protest. I mean, it's not a new thing. We have seen how service delivery protests turn out versus how protests in support of certain political leaders who are facing certain actions of accountability, especially from the judiciary. We have seen how those protests have just been led. Like it's an entire concept. You see even how the organization of the stage, the music that's being played. Like it's a jolly type of protest because nobody's being held accountable, because no answers are being sought. But in a protest where accountability is sought and answers are being sought, trust you me, law enforcement will quickly jump in.
How much can essentially be done, Stanley, at municipal level to ensure that, the rule of law is essentially followed through and that there's a sort of a uniform approach to handling the nature of protests, especially at an unprecedented time like this?
I think that is a brilliant question, and I won't claim to have a clear-cut answer to it. And for this reason, Mpho, you would now and then take note of the Auditor General's report. We have over 250 municipalities, and our local municipalities are those bodies which are entrusted with service delivery. Like they are at the forefront of ensuring that that which is promised in the Constitution actually materializes. Now, we have the Auditor General's report that comes out and says with over 250 something local municipalities, then we have less than 27 with a clean audit. So it means that the rest, they have a dirty audit, they have what, I now call it a sugar coating for the word corruption, irregular expenditure. Irregular expenditure here, billions have disappeared. Nobody can point out where those billions went. I mean, billions is not like it's 1 rand or a 10 rand note that just flies with the air, unless if I do not really understand how money works. But I don't think a billion can just disappear without a trace. But, well, with the pandemic, I think we saw that it can actually disappear with a trace. But basically what I'm trying to say is that we need more levels of accountability, especially from within the municipal structures themselves. When there is irregular expenditure, there shouldn't just be, there's irregular expenditure, so people must get to the fact that they won't have water, they will have to deal with the potholes, and we leave it like that. No, there needs to be accountability. Certain people need to be held accountable. And that's when we start talking about the rule of law, when people get held accountable to show that nobody is above the law. And if the law is broken, it doesn't matter whether you are close to the sovereign, whether you once held a higher political office. Where the law is broken, consequences must follow.
Now, the protesting essentially is the mobilization of forces in search of that accountability that you so speak of. And it's an important part of our constitution, and it's an important layout of South Africa. According to the regulations at the moment, protests or gatherings up to 100 people outside are permitted. Now, the regulations also say that if there are illegal protests, police must tell people to disperse. If not, then arrest them. But public policing in South Africa has always been in the spotlight. We've seen the approach change a little bit. You've spoken to the fact that they haven't made arrests in the likes of the EFF protests. What do you make of how, the new approach, if I can call it that, the public policing has taken in light of the fact that we will have protests, but also in light of the fact that only 100 people are allowed to gather?
Yeah. No, I think your question is driving me to this conception of targeted arrest. And just for clarity, under the current lockdown regulations, I think that there are about 3 types of protests, types of gatherings which are permitted, which is a gathering at a funeral, gathering at a workplace for work purposes, and gathering to obtain goods and services. The rest is prohibited. Not even 5 people gathering, that is prohibited until such time, I think the 11th of July, and subject to the review. So at the moment, in a nutshell, our constitutional right to protest is a criminalized conduct, if I can put it that way, in-person protests. Now, in terms of what we have seen in terms of arrests, I think we need to be mindful that not all arrests take place at the scene of the alleged offense, right? And there is nothing in the law that says that for an arrest to be lawful, the person must have been arrested at the scene of the alleged offense. So just because someone is not arrested at a protest, it doesn't mean that they will not be arrested. And in my view, if also we take a closer look also what happened to Carl Mears, what other people would term as a targeted arrest and why only he was arrested. I differ. That wasn't a targeted arrest. We have two provisions that I want to refer you to in the current lockdown regulations. We have Regulation 21, sub-Regulation 21, which says that, which obliges law enforcement officers, right, to order gatherers to disperse immediately. And if they fail to do so, then the law enforcement officer may take appropriate action, which might include arrest and detention. Then we go down, we have Regulation 21, sub-Regulation 22, which provides that if someone convenes, a convener of a political gathering commits an offense and is on conviction liable, to imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or a fine or both. Now, if you look into these two provisions, you would see that what we have here is that there is a provision which gives gatherers of a prohibited gathering an opportunity to escape criminal sanctions only if they disperse immediately after being instructed to do so. Mm-hmm. Then on the other hand, we have this provision which says, no, hold on, the convener of a prohibited gathering should not be allowed to escape criminal liability. Do not even give that person a chance to disperse. So if you look at Carl Mears and you look at his position in his organization, it is arguably that he's the one who convened the gathering insofar as the participation of his members were there. So now, according to we can't say this was a targeted arrest. If anything, Carl Mears was targeted by these regulations because as a convener, you are not even allowed that opportunity to disperse. But as a person who is participating in a gathering, you are allowed that opportunity to disperse. Because sometimes, with protests, we have seen indiscriminate arrests. We have seen indiscriminate police brutality where even bystanders can get shot, where even bystanders, I've been in court where I've represented someone who just says, no, but I was coming from the shop to go and buy bread, and as I was passing there in the midst of the gathering, I just got arrested. So that's why this provision says, if you are a participant, we are going to give you that opportunity to disperse. And if you fail to disperse, then, we are going to arrest you. But if you are the convener, you are the one who led this prohibited gathering, then you must face the music. So I don't think we can speak about targeted arrest. Rather, we can talk about a law that is targeted at those who ought to know that to convene a gathering at this particular time is actually a criminal offense, which is punishable by imprisonment or a fine.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, human rights lawyer and protest rights expert Stanley Malematja. They're giving us insight on the right to protest.